For more than a decade, we operated under a quiet assumption that social media was essentially free. You traded a few minutes of attention, saw a few ads, and the platform kept the lights on. Most people accepted that without much thought, but inside Silicon Valley, the deal looked very different. Internal emails from the world's largest tech companies revealed a level of self-awareness the public never saw. One Meta employee wrote plainly that Instagram was a drug. Others compared the company's role to that of a pusher. They described platforms engineered to function like slot machines. This week, that private understanding collided with a courtroom in Los Angeles. For the first time, a jury concluded that these platforms were not neutral tools. They were deliberately designed to create compulsive behavior, and the companies that built them knew it. This is not simply a legal defeat for two tech giants. It is the beginning of a fundamental shift in how America holds its most powerful industries accountable. The trial centers on a young woman identified as KGM, now 20 years old, who became the primary plaintiff in what may be the most consequential consumer liability case in a generation. She testified that she was using YouTube by age 6 and Instagram by age 9. Her attorneys argue that the compulsive use she developed led directly to depression, body dysmorphia, and self-harm. Her case is not an isolated one. It serves as a bellwether for more than 2,000 similar lawsuits currently working their way through the American legal system. Historically, tech companies have been well protected by Section 230, a federal law that shields platforms from liability for the content their users post. That defense has held up for 30 years. But the plaintiffs in this case built their argument on different ground entirely. They did not sue Meta and YouTube for what users said on the apps. They sued them for how the apps were built. The legal theory targets the architecture itself, the infinite scroll that never ends, the autoplay that removes the moment of choice, the beauty filters designed with full knowledge of their effect on adolescent self-image. The argument is that these features were engineered to exploit psychological vulnerabilities, particularly in children, and that the companies acted with deliberate negligence. The jury agreed. They found the companies liable, found that they acted with malice, and awarded millions in damages. Days later, a separate judgment in New Mexico added a $375 million penalty for violations of consumer protection law. The shield that protected this industry for 3 decades has, for the first time, developed a serious crack. To understand why these verdicts matter beyond the courtroom, you have to understand the business model they are challenging. Meta and YouTube do not sell a product in the traditional sense. They sell human attention to advertisers. In 2021 alone, Meta generated $118 billion in revenue, almost entirely from that transaction. The more time users spend on the platform, the more ads they see. The more ads they see, the more money the company makes. Everything flows from that single equation. That incentive structure has a name in economics. It is called a negative externality. An externality is a cost of doing business that the company does not pay. A factory that uses a cheap, polluting process keeps its profits. The surrounding community pays the price in air quality and health costs. The factory's books look clean. The damage just does not appear in them. The attention economy works the same way. The platforms internalize billions in advertising revenue. The costs of the resulting mental health crisis, the therapy, the medication, the lost years of productivity are paid by families and by the public. What made these trials different is that internal documents, unsealed and entered into evidence, showed that this was not an oversight. Company research found correlations between Instagram use and suicidal ideation in teenage girls. Executives were briefed on studies showing the platform's impact on body image. And when those findings were weighed against engagement metrics, the evidence suggests the companies repeatedly chose engagement. That is the economic case at the center of this litigation. Not that harm happened accidentally, but that it was allowed to happen because the math made it profitable. For years, the financial weight of this crisis fell on the wrong people. Families paid for therapy. School districts absorbed the institutional costs of managing anxiety, eating disorders, and self-harm at unprecedented rates. That is now changing. More than 350 families and over 250 school districts have joined the litigation, seeking reimbursement for costs they should not have been carrying. A single $6 million verdict against a $1 trillion company can look symbolic. But this is not one verdict. It is a template for thousands. Legal experts are already describing these rulings as the opening of a floodgate across all 50 states. The logic is straightforward. If maintaining a platform built around compulsive use becomes more expensive than building one designed around safety, the business case for the current model collapses. That is how litigation reshapes industries, not through one ruling, but through cumulative financial pressure that makes the old way of operating untenable. The comparisons to big tobacco are no longer rhetorical. They are structural. In the 1990s, landmark trials forced one of America's most powerful industries to publicly admit its products were designed to be addictive, that the science was known, and that it had been deliberately obscured. Those trials did not end the tobacco industry, but they permanently changed its legal exposure, its public standing, and ultimately, its business practices. The same unsealing is happening now, with technology. Internal memos acknowledging addiction as the goal, research showing psychological harm noted, reviewed, and set aside. A culture that chose engagement above safety, every single time. These documents now form the foundation of a new regulatory era. And unlike every debate about social media that came before it, this one is not about what people say online. It is about how the platforms are built. The US Surgeon General has called for warning labels on social media comparable to those on cigarettes. State legislatures across the country are moving on age verification, design restrictions, and parental notification laws. What these verdicts establish is a simple, long overdue principle. Platforms presented to the public as free were never free. They carried a cost that was paid by the most vulnerable users and absorbed by the people who loved them. Assigning that cost correctly is not just a legal matter. It is an economic correction, and it is only beginning. If this story made you think differently about how our economy actually works, that is exactly what Economy Now is here for. Subscribe to stay informed, and leave a comment below. Tell us what you think should happen next, whether that is stricter regulation, redesigned platforms, or something else entirely. Your perspective helps shape what we cover. We will see you in the next one.